Okay, so welcome to this session, Activating Exhibits, Teaching with Archives and Special Collection Displays Beyond Tours. I apparently am your MC, but we're gonna take a second to introduce ourselves, us panelists, and then I'll do like a very brief kind of like table setting, and then we'll jump into the presentations. There will be Q&A at the end. And there will also be, this will be recorded, but the Q&A won't. So give us your craziest questions. All right, so we've got three groups of presenters. I belong to the first from the University of Dayton. My name's Michele. I am the Special Collections Instruction Librarian. We didn't settle this. Are we each going to unmute and introduce? Yeah, we are. I'm deciding. Bridget, you go.
Sounds good. Hello, everyone. My name is Bridget Retzloff, and I'm the coordinator of art collections and exhibits at the University of Dayton.
Hi everyone, I'm Handley. I am the Assistant Director of the Marion Library and Special Collections and also dealing with the leak, so apologies for being very sweaty today.
All right, my name is Andrea Van Dyke, and I'm actually the archivist for rare books and special collections at Grand Valley State University.
And I'm Leigh Rupinski, and I am the director of the Lemon Library and University Archivist.
I'm so sorry I made these slides. I apologize.
No worries.
Copying and pasting is really scary.
I am Kate Carlin. I'm the exhibitions coordinator at Cornell University.
And hi, I'm Emily Barron. I am the research and instruction librarian in special collections for Cornell.
Oh, thank God. Okay. All right. So here is our thesis statement. Please not another tour. What all of our presentations are going to be focused on is how we have tried to live up to this thesis statement by centering joy and play in visitor experiences with special collections, exhibits, and displays, and really focus on providing tools for individual discovery for our visitors, from stuff related to making, drawing on museum ed, really trying to make exhibit spaces fun for everyone, demystifying, delivered, like literally taken from my notes. So that's what most of us are going to be kind of talking about, all of us really. And first up is us from University of Dayton. We're going to be talking about a card deck activity that we developed to be an activating kind of uh, pairing with our exhibits. And in order to set the scene, I'm just going to briefly tell you about the Marion Library and our exhibits program. We have reorganized into like a broader special collections unit, but this project stems from the Marion Library, which is probably, possibly, maybe the largest research library dedicated to the study of Mary of Nazareth. And we work out of the very top story of the main library on campus, Resch Library, which is why we have leaks and HVAC problems and so on. We are kind of spread across multiple gallery spaces. We have two upstairs in the Marion Library, a large, a kind of entry gallery, as well as after reception, a larger kind of museum gallery space. What is on the screen right now is our library's main floor gallery, the Stuart and Mimi Rose Gallery. It's your kind of typical white cube type exhibit space. It is donor funded and fairly well appointed, so it often is used as like a tool for embedding exhibits in classes and used to kind of leverage our campus relationships. It's often the first thing that visitors see when they walk into the main library. Now, in the Marion Library, we have, and specifically Bridget manages the Marion Library Creche collection. A creche is basically a usually three-dimensional representation, visual representation of the Christmas story. Because we are the Marion Library, Mary shows up at the Nativity, of course. And so over the years, since about 1984, we have collected over 3,600 nativity sets from all over the world, from, we believe, over 100 cultures. So we have the Creche Museum on the seventh floor that is open year-round, and that also plays host to the Mirror of Hope, which is a very, very, very large nativity. You can kind of see it in the background of this cute group shot. But it is about 12 feet wide and 5 feet high, and it kind of works in a circle, showing kind of like Old Testament to New, with the nativity in the center. The University of Dayton also hosts something called Christmas on Campus, which is basically just there's a Christmas light show. There are school groups. There are visitors of all ages, and we get a lot of requests for tours for groups of truly all ages. Um, this also includes some integration with some of our classes on campus. Specifically, there is a faculty member in music who teaches a class just on the music of Christmas. So our audience really ranges, and ranges in terms of, I would say, like skill level or class level, but also age. We're really just sort of like playing to the back of the house kind of thing. So our goal in approaching some of these tour requests, especially because they happen in December, usually the week before finals week, is to just sort of accept that giving a tour for a class is a fact of life. But we want to make it fun and we want to make it memorable. We want to use it as a place to experiment and mix different pedagogical approaches. And we felt like we should have some museum ed type influences, because we didn't really feel like we needed to recreate the wheel. So when we were faced with, yet another year of can we do a tour for the Christmas exhibit, I started just sort of like trawling various things that I had saved, bookmarked, put into Notion, etc. And one thing that I came back to was a project out of, I think, yeah, it's Loyola Marymount University, specifically from their Special Collections Instruction Librarian, Rachel Wen-Palutzian. And this particular project was actually posted to Project Cora, and that was where I had originally found it. It's one of the very few lesson plans on Project Cora that involve special collections. So this was for them centered around a foundational course, sort of a first year course called Rhetorical Arts that really emphasizes reflective and affective strategies to promote critical thinking and to bring together kind of imagination and inquiry. So LMU Libraries developed their Exhibition Explorer deck. It consists of 8 cards. There's one that just has like basic instructions on how to use the deck. There are 5 cards that just sort of ask very specific questions about the exhibit. And then there are 2 that involve short activities that promote kind of like mindfulness and slow looking. And actually, after we had adapted this activity, I participated in CalRBS in the Special Collections Pedagogy course, and we took a field trip to LMU, and I got to experience this as run by the librarians there, and it was pretty excellent. But when I initially encountered this, I thought of something that some colleagues had been doing for years at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, known as the Biblioderive, which they then took inspiration from the Situationist International. It's a kind of Dada surrealist plus Marxist political movement in the like mid 20th century. But one of their central practices is the derive or the drift, which they then reapplied to like libraries and archives. But it's basically the idea of like moving through space and allowing situations to sort of just happen in order to connect art making and everyday life. So the idea with how this was deployed at SAIC, and again, they do this every single year, is that they have a collection, usually in a card deck, of generative and open-ended actions, situations that are meant to really disrupt common research practices and ways of gathering information. Um, so it's really like a disruption for research for the library space. There are installations and happenings and all sorts of things that happen during, I believe, a week in the spring semester. And in particular, this is drifting really decouples the visit or the experience from an outcome. And I think that this concept for me is a very helpful reframing of the tour as a concept. If we accept that a certain type of engagement is going to happen, how do we create an environment where the experience itself is worthwhile, even when we don't know and can't control where it's going? You might also be thinking of, and I've had multiple people when I've described this project. Oh, sorry, I actually, I got ahead of myself. This is actually two examples from SAIC's 2023 and 2024 bibliodreves. And you can see that there's like this balancing act between specificity and ambiguity. You're told to read a book with your eyes closed or create a ritual using materials from the library. But what actually happens is up to the visitor. And so, one thing that I was thinking about is how to make this resonate outside the context of art school, right? Because we are working at a kind of mid-sized liberal arts school. And we, like I said, receive all kinds of visitors from lots of different backgrounds. So, how can we translate this experience into something that's approachable, that activates some kind of deeper learning or calculated risk taking, and basically engender an environment where visitors feel like they can commit to the bit after one single visit, right? Okay. This is where I just want to throw out, you might have heard of other card-based randomization activities. One is Brian Eno's Oblique Strategies. It has very open-ended prompts like use an old idea or consider different fading systems. There's also more structured card decks. This is the artist book on the right-hand side, the artist book ideation card deck, which is from Barbara Tettenbaum and Julie Chen of Flying Fish Press. But generally, right, the deck of cards activity really is an attempt to break us out of the like habitual teaching practices. So the inspiration that we took from these is both literal and not literal. The ideation cards are interesting because they work according to a combinable set of categories that also allow for a degree of randomization within a predetermined set of options that can be continuously reworked and recombined. So really the sense of chance and of new discovery kind of works on both ends, where we as facilitators don't really know what's going to happen, and that keeps it fresh and exciting and interesting. And this also works on the other end as well. And I saw the link to the Marina Abramovic cards. There are lots of different like art making kind of things that fall into the let's randomize things with a deck of cards. So yeah. So as we were preparing for this, the three of us met along with our kind of designer that Bridget's going to be talking about. But these were some of our influences that we were drawing on as we were coming up with prompts. So we have, everything from slow looking and visual literacy, and specifically Annie Storr's exercises for the quiet mind, which is really kind of from the museum ed end of things. but also just really making sure that the cards would allow students to draw on prior knowledge or personal expertise. So we have questions about preferences, challenging material, relational questions, as well as creative interventions. So we ask sometimes write a poem, tell a story, sketch something, and then ideally just complete silliness, right? My ideal probably teaching approach is just like clever, stupid. So ideally, there's some kind of activity that disrupts the gallery space, both like literally and also metaphorically, conceptually, right? When we developed the card deck, we tried to do some very, very rapid fire assessment. And again, the idea behind this is that the assessment was meant to mirror the process that was going on in the gallery. So there is not a very high bar for this assessment. What's a strength? What was an obstacle? Do you have any recommendations? And we have we assessed when we initially developed the prompts and probably were due for a bit more very soon. But what we discovered is that the card deck, and Bridget will talk more about the kind of development of the card deck, is that it was originally planned with just a standard playing card deck where the prompts were assigned according to a number or a face card. But what we found is that really all that this takes is a deck of cards, and there are kind of infinite applications. So we have used this activity in internal events. We like to pair this sometimes with other visual literacy activities just so that the tone stays lighthearted, especially if it's like a one shot or a group that is external. And then especially when we have groups with where we just don't know their skill level, we don't know their familiarity with the content, we don't know their familiarity with the material, anything. This is a very good standby that allows for some approachable ways maybe to help develop some of that expertise in a baby step kind of way. And next up, we're just going to talk about what we did next.
So we ended up designing, or our colleague Ann Zlotnick designed a beautiful custom card deck using images from materials in our collection. So we'll talk a little bit about that, but we'll then end it encouraging you to just use the deck of cards in your own collection or in your own, dollar store stash or whatever to. Can you advance this slide, Michelle? Thank you. So we ended up getting a mini grant from our university. There was a pedagogy initiative related to Marianist education. Marianists are the Catholic religious order that founded our university where we work. And we were awarded this pedagogical innovation mini grant of $500, which we used to design and develop this deck of cards and then to have them printed. So we ended up coming up with a couple of different suits. So rather than the hearts, diamonds, clubs, and spades, we came up with a set of suits that are connected with Marian imagery. So we chose hearts, crowns, roses, and fleur-de-lis, which is sort of a stylized lily. And we found imagery for each of the cards from things mostly that we had already had digitized in the collection. I think we ended up having a handful of things digitized as part of this project, but mostly we used things that we already had high quality images ready to go. And here's how the cards turned out. So on the left, you can see the design or sort of a selection of the card designs with those 4 different suits. And then the king, we made Jesus, the queen is Mary. And then the Joker is like a saint that had a devotion to Mary. So this is Saint John, who was at the foot of the cross. Oh, I see a chat that the slides are not showing up. Okay, looks like it's
Yeah,
looks
we're
like
good.
everyone's good.
Thank you, everyone.
Um, yeah, thanks. Thanks for alerting us to that possible problem. And then the Joker is from the sort of like medievalist story about a juggler for Mary, like a clown who his gift was juggling. And we had an exhibit recently about that story, and we had that imagery fresh in our minds and ready to use. So that's how the cards turned out, and we really did spend $500 just on having them printed because there was a minimum order number to have custom decks of cards printed, which I think was like 15 decks or something like that. So it's like it was like expensive for card decks, but we hope that these kind of like reinforce some of the like, breadth of the collection, even if it's for a really specific, if we're using them for a really specific exhibit, like our Christmas exhibit. Um, and they kind of, I think, help with like belongingness a little bit too, in that you're getting to see more, participants are seeing more of the collection and like realizing what an asset it is to our campus and to the scholarly community too. But you can do this too. You can do it too. It really does not need a custom card deck. It really can be just a deck of cards from the Dollar Tree and a set of prompts. And we had a couple other tips and takeaways on the next slide. Um, just get a regular old card deck, keep it in your desk, learn some card tricks in your spare time. We have like Michelle and I have a little bit going where we like shuffle the cards dramatically and we're trying to learn some card tricks to incorporate too. But
I learned one and then promptly forgot it.
yeah, it needs some we need to practice some more. But that, you know, also ties in with our tip to just get goofy with it. We bring sort of like a goofy energy to it. And sometimes participants bring that, and sometimes they really do not appreciate it at all. So we try not to be surprised when our energy isn't matched, but it's fun. It's more fun for us to play it up a little bit and to do this kind of activity and not just give another tour. One other thing that we've been doing in practice that we think is really important for the overall tone of the activity is to applaud for everyone. Some of the prompts are like a little goofy, as we've alluded to, and some of them are a little like academic. So we're asking people to put themselves out there a little bit, and when at the end of a session, we usually pull from the cards that were selected by participants. So someone's going to get cold called by you know the ace of hearts getting pulled from the deck. Anyone who had pulled an ace and did that prompt then has to share with the group. So we make sure that everyone gets a round of applause for their participation and for sharing what their reaction is to the exhibit based on that prompt, and reinforce that there are no right answers. And our final tip is don't reinvent the wheel. We come back to pretty much the same list of prompts for like each exhibit that we use this with. Some of them we switch out, like there's one about, for the Christmas exhibit, about writing a Hallmark movie trailer based on the nativity set that you're looking at. So that doesn't work for other types of exhibits, but we have sort of a running list to pull from, and the prep for this activity is always really simple. And you're welcome to use our list of prompts as a starting point, which I think Michelle just shared the link to in the chat. And there's also the QR code on the slide will take you to the folder with materials from the presentations. Thanks. We look forward to any questions at the end.
Thank you. I'm going to stop sharing now.
All right, so thank you all so much for coming. Again, my name is Andrea Van Dyke, and I'm the archivist for rare books and special collections at the Lemon Library and Archives at Grand Valley State University.
Sorry, I started sharing my screen and lost my Zoom controls. So my name is Leigh Rupinski, and I'm the director of Lemon Library and Archives, where I work with Andrea very closely.
So today, Leigh and I are going to discuss some of the successes we've had in engaging students with our materials outside of the traditional exhibit and also outside of the traditional classroom setting. Next slide. Right. So first, some context. Like I said, Leigh and I work at the Lemon Library, which is located in Allendale, Michigan, which is near Grand Rapids on the western side of the state. We're a small team, so Leigh and I are the only full-time archivists at the library, but we do also have a visiting archivist and some part-time support staff. So we also have a small budget, both for new acquisitions and for supplies. So our ideas for outreach always need to be fairly simple to execute and cannot require a lot of money to do so. We emphasize experiential learning with classes and groups of students who visit the archives. So we want students to be able to explore archival materials and rare books at their own pace and by touching the materials directly. So interactive exhibits like the ones we'll describe allow us to put this principle into practice. And we also believe that archives are for everyone. We want all students to have the opportunity to discover the joy of archives and the joy of being able to touch books that are hundreds of years old. We have a robust one-off teaching program at the Lemon Library, but we wanted to reach students who aren't in these classes who would also enjoy this opportunity if given the chance. We wanted to create some out-of-the-classroom experiences for students to visit, learn about the archives, and find joy.
So, as Andrea mentioned, Archives Joy is a key principle for us because our audience is primarily undergraduate students who are completely new to archives. We want to make sure that what we're
Yes, we
doing,
had a copy. Okay, that's right. Sorry, just making sure.
we want to make sure that our exhibits speak to them, and that they're very welcoming and reflective of our values, that you don't need to be doing serious academic research all the time to come in and use the archives or to find something cool. That this is it's essentially a fun place to see things, and think about how that might, intersect with your life in some way. So, as a small team, Andrea and I and our student employees and support staff have agreed that these values are important to us, and therefore we're willing to engage in more experimentation and effort for projects that align with these values, in order to create that welcoming space. A particular niche interest area of mine is the role of play in learning. There are many, many, many studies out there that explain how play can reduce stress, improve mood, and increase the capacity to learn by engaging the brain in different ways. I've linked just one of those articles on this slide, but a good search will bring you to many, many more. Exhibits and outreach methods that do more than traditional kinds of, read a label to learn something, show and tell tour, kind of help us provide a through line with our classroom practices where we employ universal design for learning principles that kind of have those multiple means of engagement, multiple modes of participation. So we kind of provide choices for how students can interact with us, so that they're able to choose how they want to show up in this space. Students can choose to simply read labels. There's nothing wrong with that. We do still offer basic tours, or they can go deeper by following a QR code or link, engaging in a scavenger hunt, answering trivia questions, and a lot of other types of activities that we'll talk about more in this presentation. So here's some of the examples of activated types of exhibits that we've done in the past at Lemon Library. I've sort of sorted them into these general categories, but we'll get more in depth on quite a few of them. In this first section, we've used bingo games in the classroom and in club meetings to engage students, particularly with visual-based material or items in other languages. We've also used magnet poetry as a really low intervention exhibit add-on. So students can create poetry using magnetic words that we've printed from materials in our collection. So they still have that, different typefaces and looks to them. And then they just are free to create and leave their poetry up on a whiteboard for others to take inspiration from. In the category I've labeled not tours, we've come up with some more particular solutions to the standard walking tour, which is kind of difficult in our stack setup and doesn't allow for much engagement with our materials beyond kind of a somewhat random show and tell of what we can easily handle while standing up and moving through the stacks. So we've used a rare book zoo and a rare books open house to draw people into the stacks in different ways. And finally, we've used exhibit spaces to create something that was kind of an interactive, if you're familiar with those choose your own adventure books or Dungeons and Dragons, this kind of model where players, any of the students who come into our study lounge that's part of our building, can roll dice and choose their path along this story and engage with materials in that way. And we also have an ongoing set of 3 flat display cases. They're all kind of lined up in a row where students can quickly submit a colored piece of paper to vote for the materials in this case, that case, or the other case. That kind of allows for really quick participation. They don't have to do a lot of reading. They don't really have to know any historical context. They just get to tell us, what do they like? What are they interested in? And usually these kind of rotate around a theme. And it helps us to see what is eye-catching to students or what are they resonating with. So each of these activities falls across a spectrum of effort. The most high effort ones are not sustainable for us to do frequently, but the low intervention, low touch models can be implemented pretty easily.
Okay, so I conducted outreach to GVSU's History Club to see if they'd be interested in holding one of their meetings at our library to look at some interesting items. They were very enthusiastic, so I planned out a bingo game. I selected some books and archival materials to place on tables around the room, and then created bingo squares based on the materials. So one square of the board might say, like, find a book published in Amsterdam, or find the photos of our former mascot, for example. Students wandered the room, they could examine materials at a leisurely pace, and they could participate as much or as little as they wished. The books and materials generally had information sheets that students could choose to read that gave context about the item. And this game works particularly well for materials that are not in English, since students can still analyze those books as material objects. And once students had a bingo, we gave them a small prize. Most students actually elected to fill their entire bingo board. So the event was a huge hit. The History Club came back again the following semester, and I used this event template again for GVSU's Renaissance Festival Club, and they also had a really wonderful time. Multiple students in the RenFest Club expressed wonder and excitement at being in the archives, which most of them did not know existed until that point. And actually, a couple of those students applied for jobs to work with us, and we hired one of them. So that worked out really well. These club outreach events with a bingo sheet and special collections materials have been extremely popular, and I do have plans to expand this offering to more clubs on campus kind of each semester. There is a fair amount of work in creating the initial bingo sheet and information sheets for the items, but you can then, reuse these materials for different groups that visit. So for us, it's definitely been a worthwhile time investment.
This next event I'm going to talk about was actually the second version of a rare books open house that we held, as you might guess, around Halloween. It was Clue themed. So if any of you are familiar with the board game Clue, it was based on playing a live action sort of version of that game in the stacks. So we opened up our first floor stacks for participants to play along a board game path by walking to different preset rooms, areas of our stacks that we had sort of designated with signs that were set up for sort of mini exhibits. So, if you went to the dining room, you saw some of our cookbook history and some of the plates and table settings from our collections and things like that. So each room highlighted materials related to that area if we possibly could. The ballroom had part of our musical score collection. And then some areas that we couldn't make a real good match for, like the hallway, had things such as our university archives materials, so that those were also given an opportunity to be showcased. Each of these preset rooms had facts about the collections. The materials themselves were on display for viewing. There would be little, label cards about how we care for the materials or other information drawn from the collection items themselves. And then there would be trivia questions with a flip panel where you could guess and gain a clue to cross off on your sheet to try to solve the mystery of who done it in Lemon Library. At the end of the walkthrough was a whiteboard to record your guess of who done it, where, and with what. And this also helped us track how many people participated. Staff members monitored the spaces by acting as suspects, obviously with appropriate archival themed names. And we could also provide clues from a deck of cards we carried in hand if anyone needed an extra hint, couldn't find a trivia question answer, things like that. And so this way participants could choose if they wanted to talk to us more or if they just wanted to participate quietly and do the walkthrough. If they could choose how many, of the flip trivia questions they really wanted to try to answer. So it was pretty flexible. This event took a lot of preparation and planning, but was also one of the most energizing for our staff involved, and we had a high level of feedback about how fun the event was. Because each station was set up like a little mini exhibit and there were interactive elements and clues to spot around each area, it was pretty fun and engaging and made our stacks feel a lot more lively than our typical tour.
Right. So, Animals in the Archive Night was an event we held for the History Club last semester, and I'm hoping to also hold this event for more clubs next year. There were multiple like zoo stations set up in our space. So we had an insect house, an aviary, savanna, pond, domestic animal station, etc. We would then place materials at each table that related to that area. So our insect house, for example, included a stuffed bookworm and information about bookworms, a 17th century book about insects, and a couple of 20th century books about insects. Our domestic animals table included photos of sled dogs on our campus, a local woman's scrapbook dedicated to her dog, and quite a bit more. The table I was most proud of in this exhibit was the Rare Book Petting Zoo. The zoo featured featured 15th to 18th century books with a variety of bindings, including some print books and a manuscript. We had books with bindings made of cow and calf, so both leather and vellum, as well as sheep, goat, pig, and deer. A manuscript written on parchment was also included. So each book included an information sheet giving basic information about the book, identified the animal in the binding, and provided a few sentences about the binding style. This activity enabled students to interact with rare books and consider the materiality of the bindings and parchment and what this tells us about bookmaking, society, and culture during these time periods, as well as connecting books to animals and the environment, again, in a tangible, material way. Students learned about these topics without being able to read the books themselves. Instead, they could engage with their senses of touch and curiosity to explore the materials. They could choose to read a few sentences of information included with each book, could explore the book's interior, or they could simply look at or touch the different bindings. Students completed an optional worksheet as they walked around the room and visited each station, and students who completed the worksheet, or at least attempted to do so, won a prize. Students reported that they really enjoyed this activity. We plan to offer this to other clubs that are interested in visiting the archives, and the Rare Book Zoo in particular has potential for our history of science and history of technology courses that regularly visit the archives. So we think we are able to use this for classroom use as well.
I mentioned earlier these sort of flat cases that we have as the entry point to our study lounge, and there are sort of three cases right in a row, and they're flat and a little bit too small to really prop many materials successfully, and so they can be a little bit challenging for us to fill. And the first time we really had the idea to use them interactively was with this sort of Dungeons and Dragons choose your own adventure style exhibit that's stretched across all three. So dice and a rolling surface were provided on top of the cases for participants to play along and see where their journey took them. In the first case, you chose your class, so things like collector, archivist, archaeologist, and then you could choose an archival item to help you along your journey: white gloves, a box, a mug, a library stamp, and these would grant you different powers throughout the adventure. Then different scenarios were provided for you to roll through using the general inspiration of our collections. And at the end, the boss battle took place with a giant insect drawing that we took from one of the pages of our rare books. I'm not going to lie, it took a while to get the logistics of this game figured out and make the pathways connect properly. But now that we know how to set it up, we can kind of change out the beats of the story with different collections, inspiration items, sub in and out different parts of the adventure to highlight new things. Other types of exhibits we've done include creative workshops. We've had students lead sessions on cyanotypes and woodcuts where they show examples from the collections and then have students do kind of maker sessions on those topics. The voting cases I mentioned earlier, which kind of do very quick highlights of our materials. Our latest topic was what this Pokemon would read in our collections and featured Pikachu, Gengar, and Eevee. Eevee won by a mile. And finally, we have Spotify playlists as a form of outreach and touring the materials that provide music correlated to our major collecting areas. So music that was created during the time Incunabula was printed, songs related to Michigan history, things like that. So students can feel immersed in the collection in kind of a different way.
And thank you so much. We're happy to take any questions at the end of the presentations and have also left our contact information next to the picture of our friend Berleos the bookworm, who's a beloved teaching tool in our archive. So thank you.
It would help if I unmute. Let me see if I can get my screen share going. All right. Is everyone seeing the presentation and not the Google Sheets? Um, first off, thank you to both groups of our co-presenters. You all have amazing ideas, and I can't wait to try some of these out myself. Um, so I'm going to start by just giving a little bit of an overview of our exhibition spaces in the Division of Rare and Manuscript Collections at Cornell. We have two different spaces, our Hirschland Gallery, which is our large exhibition space, which I'm going to talk about first. And then we also have an exhibition space in our entry rotunda that my colleague Kate is going to go over a little bit. So this is a photo that shows our large scale exhibition space. It is quite a large room. So this is a space that we typically only rotate out about once a year, just because the prep work to get everything together and to really fill it does take quite a bit of time. So it is something that is up for an entire school year, meaning that it sees a lot of foot traffic from classes. It also sees a lot of foot traffic during various events on campus. Um, and so I had the, honor of doing the current exhibition we have up called Plant-Based Botanical Innovations from Paper to Poison. And when I was thinking about what I wanted to do with the exhibition, I will fully admit that I had ideas for outreach activities before I actually had the cases planned. For anyone who's wondering about my process when it comes to stuff, the answer is let's make it fun and then let's actually do the work to set it up in the first place. So Plant-Based opened in September of 2025 and is open through the end of August of this year. And we wanted to try to find ways to do engagement with the space itself, but also in connected programming, so that we had some things that were a little bit lower lift for our staff, as well as things that could be very easily incorporated if we were, needing an activity for a class, but maybe the class was too large and had to be split into different groups, or something that could be very self-guided. And then we also wanted to try and build in some more creative programming. We've historically maybe had talks associated with some of our exhibitions, or pop-ups that may be related to it by showing some additional material. But this was something that we really wanted to get creative with and also use it as a way to teach people more about what was on display in some of the cases. So one of our interactive pieces was actually our guest book. We made our guest book look like little plant cards like you would use if you were labeling plants in some kind of herbarium. And that way we were essentially collecting our visitors as specimens. So it included things like their specimen name, their location, and any notes that needed to be added, which was their opportunity to write and tell us about what it is that they enjoyed. We've gotten a lot of great feedback on this. People have thought it's really fun. Our biggest challenge with this for anyone who's trying really creative guestbook options is that sometimes people don't understand that they can fill all three spots on a sheet. People don't have to move on to a clean sheet to do theirs. So it's been a little bit of a learning curve. We also, with this exhibition, tried to incorporate some very three-dimensional and outside of case components. And one of the things we did was these modern day Wardian cases. So I will explain for people who aren't as familiar with Wardian cases. Essentially, they're the forerunners to modern terrariums. Would have been the way that it was first made possible for people to transport plants live specimens across oceans when people were exploring, and made it to where people didn't have to rely just on seeds or dried plant specimens. So we have a few plants that are plants. All of our plants are silk plants. I promise they did not let us bring actual plants into the archives. But we have several plants inside of a couple of different terrariums, but we also have this empty one that allows people to lift up the lid, take a look inside, and kind of understand the mechanics a little bit better. So it corresponds quite nicely to the case where we talk about exploration related to plants, and their dissemination. And this made it a really easy way to kind of connect that for people and also give a more illustrative understanding than what we could with just the materials. One of my personal favorites in the gallery is actually the scavenger hunt that we made. So we have cards, and then along our windowsills, we have different plants on display. Some of them are in hoarding cases, some of them are in pots, some of them are just laying out on the windowsill. And then we have a card that gives them the instructions that every plant that they see on display has a counterpart somewhere in the exhibition. So it's a way to kind of give people an opportunity to move around the gallery, make it a little bit fun and gamify it. But of course, we did also want to make sure that people, if they were having trouble locating things, that they had the opportunity to use our little hints, which was at the back of the gallery. So you really had to work to get to the hints, but we made sure that they were still there. So the scavenger hunt was actually originally developed as a possibility for classes. As I mentioned, sometimes we get classes that are large enough that we don't really have the space to be able to have all of the students come at once. So this is an opportunity that allows us to give an activity that allows us to split the groups into parts, which is very handy. Then we get kind of outside of the actual exhibition space itself, and we get into our workshops that are a lot more of a higher level lift for our staff, and involved a really, really fantastic opportunity to collaborate with our conservation lab team. But they all connect back to material that is in the exhibition. So this gave us a good way to demonstrate how some of these things worked, while also giving people a chance to get their hands dirty away from collection materials. So one of the first workshops that we did was an iron gall ink workshop, where we actually used a historic recipe that our conservation lab had found, and literally went to the lab and made iron gall ink. And people were able to take little vials of ink home with them. They were able to practice writing. As you can see, I've got one of the professors who was really excited trying to write the alphabet out with a quill for me. And this proved very, very popular. It was the first workshop that we did related to the exhibition, and we actually had to wind up offering a second session of it because we had so much interest. And the professor that you actually see writing here wanted her students for her class to participate this in so badly that we actually offered a separate workshop just for that class. And it's now become something that we're working with our conservation lab to be able to offer on a case-by-case basis, for relevant classes. So this workshop has also really informed our instruction in a really unique way and created a partnership that we weren't really planning on initially. So iron gall, very fun. And there's examples of iron gall in the exhibition, so that's how we're pulling that in. We also did, and this was our very fun arts and crafts, a little more tangentially related workshop, but we did a workshop on miniature plants. One of our colleagues, Aisha Neely, does these really wonderful miniature plant and miniature macrame holders. And so she led a workshop where she walked people through her process of creating those things, as well as how she determines what to use to create these miniaturized plants. Because obviously, there's a lot of the plants that you want to make that you can't buy small enough scale ones to do. So you have to get creative with material from other larger faux plant specimens. We also really wanted to do this to give an opportunity for Aisha to show off her craft even more, because the passion flower that you see right here was actually originally all white, and was completely doctored and painted by hand by Aisha to make it look like the passion flowers that are in another part of the exhibition. So this gave us a way to kind of show off Aisha's creative skills for more people. Once again, we wound up actually having to offer two versions of this workshop because people were really excited, which was always great to hear. And then finally, and I'm glad to hear that someone else has been doing cyanotypes, so it wasn't just us. We did do cyanotype workshops. This is one where, again, we partnered with our conservation lab team. And this was definitely our probably most involved. It involves a lot of different steps. It involves different spaces. You have to have access to sinks and things like that. And then our conservation lab team actually took it a step beyond in terms of skills and creativity. And they actually made a UV light box, which you can see pictured here. So that way we would be able to do this workshop come rain or shine. And this way we were able to offer people two different ways of doing cyanotypes as long as the weather held out. And it also allowed us to kind of give a much more visual and quick representation of how exactly some of this works. So we did a kind of collage set that went into the, into the light box, and then people did their own personal ones that we took upstairs and outside to be able to expose. Again, this is another thing, relates specifically to a series of cyanotypes that's in the exhibition as part of a contact printing case that relates to plants. But this was just a really fun opportunity. And it also provided a great professional development opportunity for our conservation lab to learn more about photography techniques, light exposure, and how it affects material, which has been really helpful as we do have pretty extensive photography collections. And it also has been helpful because it's given them something to work on while the lab is being renovated. So we've had a lot of fun with these. It's something that I really hope that we're able to continue. And the best part is that the cyanotypes and the iron gall both have actually had interest from professors who want to incorporate them into their classes. So it's giving us a chance to do outreach in the library through not only connections to our collection material, but also to some of our different departments and the really amazing work that they're doing. And now I'll turn it over to Kate.
Hello. So as Emily was mentioning, we have two different exhibit spaces in rare and manuscript collections. So I'm going to talk a little bit about outreach associated with our smaller exhibit space. This area has 3 cases plus a little bit of wall space that we can use for framed items or projections. And it is by the entrance to our department. So everyone who comes to rare and manuscript collections walks through this space, whether they're on the way to the gallery or the reading room or one of our classrooms. This spring, we installed our first student-curated exhibit in this space. This student was a member of a humanities scholars cohort, which took a series of classes together over the course of 2 years, culminating in a capstone project. We worked with our student, Jeffrey, for about a year, resulting in this exhibition as his capstone. We structured the process, guiding him through our typical exhibition curation procedures and arranging tours of things like our conservation lab and our digitization studio, so he could see the various behind the scenes stages of prep. But the exhibit content was fully his work. It was fully student-led. He titled his exhibit Public Health on the Hill, Creating Community Through Communication, and focused on medical communication around HIV and COVID as 2 major health events that affected student life, and comparing how that communication differed based on the specifics of each epidemic. Thanks, Emily. And because this was a new curation format for us, it led to some publicity and other outreach opportunities that the exhibits in this smaller space of ours typically don't incorporate. So Jeffrey was everywhere. The pictures here show him posing with the exhibit for library social media, presenting his capstone project at a Humanities Scholars Conference, and two of quite a few articles which were published in various campus outlets about his work. So reaching outlets that don't typically cover these types of exhibits and therefore reaching readers of those outlets who may not have previously been familiar with their exhibition program was exciting for us. And Jeffrey also acted as sort of an ambassador for our exhibits and collections, inviting friends and classmates who had never visited rare and manuscript collections before to come see his exhibit, and encouraging other students to explore interdisciplinary interests and potential similar capstone projects. Um, I'm not sure we'll ever be able to match having a student telling anyone who will listen that working with us was one of the most meaningful experiences of his college career, in terms of future outreach, but we do hope to maintain the connections made and use them to expand future outreach and teaching opportunities, whether that be other student curated exhibits, incorporating student exhibits into, or incorporating student research into exhibits in other ways, or specific exhibit related programming. And then the second exhibit I'll touch on briefly to end here was titled Sit, Stay, Early Photographs of Dogs. The material on display was drawn from a sort of unusual photography teaching collection, which contains examples of many photographic formats and processes, all depicting dogs alone without the presence of owners or other people in the frame. So, as you may know, many early photographic processes involved long exposure times, so getting dogs to sit still without a human or even a leash to hold them in place long enough for the photo to be taken was quite a feat. This exhibit was up during Cornell's alumni weekend and was a stop on a library scavenger hunt. So that was a really broad outreach method aimed at bringing a wide audience into the department. And it was popular since many alums attend alumni weekend with family, including kids. And this was such a fun exhibit. It was interesting to kids. Everyone loves animal pictures, and this was a good way to reach a lot of people. And then we also had a very targeted teaching opportunity associated with this exhibit. A course titled Animals in Global Cinema was being taught during the semester this exhibit was up. At the time during the semester when this class visited, their coursework was focused on photography of animals. So we were able to both pull additional relevant material that wasn't already on display for the students to work with, and do a much more detailed look at the exhibit, focusing on things like photographic technology and the logistics of photographing animals, which we wouldn't normally get so deep into during a typical gallery tour. So that really focused outreach was a good connection to make as well. The pictures here include a great display method that our conservation team came up with to show the different layers of an ambrotype, including how the photo looks on a light versus dark background. The center photo is my personal favorite dog. And then the photo on the right shows another display arrangement that we were particularly proud of, which allowed the viewer to look through a stereoscope, even from outside of the exhibit case. So I think I am the last person, so I don't know if Michele had any kind of closing comments, or maybe we're